This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.
Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, originally the building was a hospital called Mercy, and that is exactly what it hoped for, as the former Lindy Boggs Medical Center needs help. The same is true of the Plaza Towers, as well as several other seriously blighted buildings rusting in the skyline. Emergency help of a different sort was initiated this month as the city launched a call system specializing in mental health issues. On the same day of reports that Mayor LaToya Cantrell and two other city officials took a costly trip to South Korea, a federal monitor criticized the police department's investigation of the security protection used in previous trips and here at home. We'll discuss these stories as well as an ordinance that could affect preservation area signage. We begin, though, with a cyber hack that could impact the impact that it might have in Louisiana. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Gabriella Killett, staff writer, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, Nick Crastle, reporter, The Lens, and Tony McCauley, staff writer, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. And we're going to go over to Errol first because there is a big hack of the OMV here in the state.
Who'd have ever thought, back in the Cold War days, when we heard about the bombs and all that one day there'd be a battle, I guess, a perceived battle with Russians over access to driver's licenses. And that's what's been going on. I mean, certainly in the United States, but actually in spots around the world. And that the organization, remember you used to worry about the KGB? The organization here is called CLOP, C-L-O-P, out of Russia, which sounds like something James Bond should have been after a long time ago. But supposedly what happens, there's an organization called Move It, and what it does, that it's a file transfer service. It's scheduled out of New England, and it has clients across the country, including channels, including in Louisiana with the state and with the motor vehicle, in Portland, Oregon, and other things, some airlines and all that. And so what they do is they get access, or you give them access to all your files, and they have the ability to transfer it. Now, the thing is, if you don't want to fall into CLOP's hands, apparently, what seems to be happening, it started in Oregon, of all places, which seems to have gotten the biggest bite. And then there was the last few days we've been hearing about it in Louisiana, that they have access to the Office of Motor Vehicles files. So there's a lot of concern. Now, there was a big news conference today talking about this and talking about the dangers, but at the same time, they were very assuring, because what CLOP would do if they get it, theoretically, is that they're using this for ransom, is that they'd make it public. And they even sent out notices saying, if by a certain day, if you don't deal with us, we'll publish all this information. Today they made a point that none of this has happened. I mean, there's no evidence of them having access or saying anything or doing anything, but it could happen. And so that's what people would be concerned about. So if you go to the websites, there's all kind of information about precautions that you should take, if things get bad. It may happen. On the other hand, it seems to me like a long shot. I mean, to ransom the United States government, you got to really be good.
Well, elements of the United States government have been in, like the BBC, University of Georgia system. It's a lot of big institutions.
It's a tough crowd you're facing when it comes to...
But bottom line, it's our personal information that they had access to, which is pretty disconcerting. And certainly, like you said, there are precautions that you can take to protect yourself for as much as you can protect yourself in this world now.
And it's mostly the driving-related information, like driver's license and vehicle registration.
Right, exactly, vehicle registration.
But the state says it's going to be posting a lot of information on its website, Louisiana.gov, and so check that out.
So go check that out and maybe change your passwords. We were talking about thinking, we really don't want to have to change our passwords.
If you see a shadowy figure somewhere, it might be the man from CLOP. So.
Okay, E. Thanks a lot. Tony, let's go over to you. Okay, we've been seeing a big eyesore for a long time, post-Katrina now. And in a building that started out years ago as a hospital, and then Lindy Boggs Medical Center it ultimately became, and then it has just been blighted, and nothing seems to be happening positively with it, even though those who own it right now are trying.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a succession of owners since it was flooded in the Katrina situation. It's one of those big buildings around town that's, you know, a lot of people have had patience over the years, I think, because they understood it was going to be very difficult to bring back Charity Hospital, Lindy Boggs, places like Plaza Tower, you know, really challenging big projects. But there's, you know, a sense that people are running out of patience now. We saw recently the city took action with the owners of, the owner actually of both the Poland Avenue old naval base and Plaza Tower. And the same is happening with the relatively new owners of Lindy Boggs. They met with the neighborhood residents in the past week to try to explain the situation, where things stood. They plan to put in an elder care facility there, about 260 odd beds. But they've run up against bureaucratic hurdles with HUD financing, which is actually a common theme with all of these buildings. They need subsidies from the government with historic tax credit subsidies and HUD subsidies to make it work. Otherwise, it's just too expensive to actually, you know, do what they want to do. Would be in the $100 million mark. But they've run up against this sort of situation that even HUD financiers were unaware of, apparently, to do with the flood-prone area that they're in, and the fact that they have a basement there and all that kind of stuff. So they're trying to get around it with a waiver, and they hope that'll be within a month. If they do, it'll be 9 months to a year before they get the financing in place. And you know, people are kind of fed up with the promises and the fact that the police say they can't do much about the vandals and the squatters and so on, which actually creates crime in the area.
Right.
And so
it's so unsightly too.
It's unsightly, and they've promised to spend $185,000 some months back now, almost a year ago, to clean that up. They've put up fencing, which they explained to the residents did little to keep people out. They use power tools to get in. So now they're going to spend $200,000 to put up specially tailored metal windows on the building to try to keep folks out while they wait for this financing, you know. But I think people are like, you know, come on, put in some serious security patrols, which is an expensive undertaking, and also, you know, make it easier for the police to do sweeps in these places and clean it up, as you said, clean it up more than.
And as a couple of other buildings around town, like Poland Avenue and also Plaza Towers, if those have been secured a bit more, as you told me earlier, that vagrants seem to be migrating perhaps out of those buildings over there too.
Yeah, the city concentrated with the owner on those buildings recently, and they did sweeps, and they essentially put pressure on the owner to put more security measures in, and they moved folks out of there, and they seem to be turning up at Lindy Boggs. Yeah. So yeah, it's a rolling situation.
And so the developers that have Lindy Boggs, they hope to put their project in there, but meanwhile they also have it for sale.
Yeah, they put it up for sale a few months ago. They said they want to, you know, if somebody comes along with a better idea and deeper pockets, as they put it, they would sell. They declined to say how much they bought it for, but they have a $10 million mortgage note on it, according to public records. So if somebody feels like they can come along and pay that price and then spend another $100 million to put it into commercial use, then we'll have to wait and see. They said they had no interest as of last week. It would cost, they said, about $3 million to just demolish it, which the city said that they would actually go ahead and they've got tighter rules since a bill was passed in legislation last week. That they can pursue criminal charges against persistent offenders. They said the city officials were there at this meeting as well. They said they don't want to do that, but that they will if you know, if nothing happens with something like this, you know.
Yeah.
And then they will do something like potentially forced demolition of it.
Yeah. Well, we hope that this problem can be resolved in a quick way, and certainly the owners right now have been trying to clean it up and keep it safe. So, and you wanted to talk a little bit about a history of what was there, what has been there, and that's.
Well, at the time, New Orleans was regarded, and rightfully so, as a very, very unhealthy place because of swamps all around and the yellow fevers and the tropics and all of this. So healthcare organizations have always looked at New Orleans. In 1924, the Sisters of Mercy came in and established themselves. And then eventually they built a hospital, and the place we became familiar with the place that we're talking about right now, that we see by St. John. Yeah. In 1994, it merged with Southern Baptist Hospital. So here you had this very ecumenical, this Catholic nuns and the Southern Baptists that merged, and they tried that. That seemed like a thing that would work. After a few years, though, it was sold to Tenet Hospital. There was a time in the 1990s when the two big competing companies in New Orleans were Tenet and Columbia, just as today LCMC and Oxnard are. And so Tenet took it over, and they developed it into the Lindy Boggs Medical Center. It's been a handsome building in the right hands. I think it maybe could have done well. It was not where all the other hospitals were, and so it had a lot of potential. But the real blow came from Hurricane Katrina.
Right.
That Katrina was just devastating, and it's never really climbed back from that.
No, it hasn't. It's a long time, almost 20 years.
Yeah, just one thing to add. One of the partners that owns it currently is the owner of the St. Margaret's right next door, and that used to be part of the whole complex. And just kind of underscoring the bureaucracy that's holding development up is they allowed, HUD allowed the development of the next door building into what is now an elder care facility under St. Margaret's, but it was stalled in this one that used to be part of the same complex.
So any idea about this waiver? Do you think it will be granted?
They'll know
Do
in
they
30 days. And
Okay.
they got the backing of the mayor and various other people, so they're really hopeful. But
Okay. All righty. Thanks a lot, guys. All right, Gabby.
Either one.
Okay. Let's go over to you now, because the consent decree monitor came out with a report regarding Officer Jeffrey Vapi, and he's been a part of the security team for Mayor Cantrell. So why don't you tell us what the monitor said, and then also what the police department said about that issue?
Sure. So yesterday, Thursday, there were a few reports that were released to the public for the first time. One of these was the disciplinary proceedings of Senior Police Officer Jeffrey Vapi, who was assigned to the Executive Protection Detail of New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell. And that disciplinary proceeding was put into action because it was signed by our interim superintendent, Michelle Woodfork, on Wednesday, June 14th. And the outcome of that investigation was 2 letters of reprimand for Officer Vapi, in which 3 violations of NOPD policy were sustained, and they were particularly geared toward standards of professionalism and their standard of protection that he's accused of violating. And in addition to that, the federal monitor as well as the city produced reports responding to each other about the federal monitor, how they felt about how the Public Integrity Bureau investigation of Vapi was conducted, and then the city's response to the monitor. So the monitors said in their report that they didn't feel the city, the Public Integrity Bureau, that's a part of the New Orleans Police Department, didn't conduct the investigation to a legal standard. They said that they didn't follow a substantial amount of evidence, which included interviews with people who were involved, and then the city came back and defended their investigation and said that they felt like it was sufficient.
So at issue here was the amount of time that Officer Vapi had spent with the mayor and where, and then also payroll issues, right?
Yes, that is true. So
the federal monitors felt that there should have been deeper investigation. It should have been delved into a little bit more. Is this what they were saying in their report?
Yes, that is correct. They specifically said that there should have been an interview conducted between PIB, Public Integrity Bureau investigators, and the former police superintendent, Sean Ferguson, which much of these discrepancies, were held under, as well as the mayor herself. And the city did respond that both of those parties refused an interview. But that being said, the federal monitors did believe that the investigation should have been held to a higher legal standard.
And of course, the former police chief, like the current police chief, were both appointed by the mayor. So you just wonder how valuable that's going to be. You know?
Also, as far as the federal consent decree is concerned, of course, the mayor is asking to get from under that. She wants that to end. And there's been disagreement between the monitors and the federal judge and the mayor regarding that. So where are we now and where we're headed to?
That's true. There's certainly been a lot of back and forth. And so what our next step is that actually next week, or maybe the week after, it's the 28th of June, there will be a hearing on the motion to terminate, which was initially filed in August of 2022. And this is, of course, the motion to terminate the consent decree hearing. So we'll see where they go from there. And
so the mayor had objected to members of the city administration and NOPD appearing at some meetings that were held, by the monitor. Will there be NOPD representatives at these hearings in court?
What I've found is that the number of NOPD brass present at these hearings has gone down significantly, but there still have been NOPD representatives, namely the superintendent herself, as well as deputy superintendents. So I would guess that there would still be representatives, but not as widely in attendance as they have been in the past.
Okay. And as far as Officer Vapi, 2 letters of reprimand, and that was from PIB within the NOPD.
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot, Gabby.
Thank you.
Nick, let's go on over to you, because now in the city of New Orleans, there's a special mental health crisis unit that is dealing with some 911 calls. And that started the beginning of this month. How is that going?
Well, city leaders say it's going really well. Like you said, it started at the beginning of this month, but it's been a long time coming, both in terms of kind of trying to get the money to establish it in the first place, and then the city signed a contract about 9 months ago with a private provider that was going to set it up. So it's been in development for quite a while and just started at the beginning of the month. They held a big press conference yesterday with the communications district and the health department, and Mayor Cantrell was there. And so far, they said in the first 2 weeks that they've set this response team up. They've handled about 90 calls. And it seems, based on numbers I've gotten, it sounds like they've actually gone out. This unit, it's teams of 2, and they're mental health professionals, and they go out to respond to calls. And I think they went out to about half of those calls, so somewhere in the neighborhood of around 50 responses. And they try and connect the people with services, or try and kind of deal with the crisis on the scene, and talk with people.
And they're not arriving in a police car and an
No.
ambulance or anything. They're trying to be, I guess, less frightening in their
Yeah, exactly right. They're showing up in these kind of special green vans. And part of the reason is, like you said, is when law enforcement responds to mental health crises, it can sometimes exacerbate them. Yeah. And so part of the purpose of this program is to have an alternative response.
So how does this work? Does an individual have to call a certain number to get this mental health team, or is it just you call 911 and 911, the dispatcher makes the decision if somebody needs to?
Yeah, so it's through 911, and the dispatcher will make the determination. And they're only supposed to be responding to nonviolent behavioral health crises. So the dispatcher has a certain protocol that they go through to determine whether or not this team is the appropriate response for any given situation.
Why did the city want to do this?
Well, for a number of reasons. Advocates have been pushing for this for a long time to basically just reduce the number of interactions between law enforcement and individuals who are in crisis, who aren't necessarily doing anything, criminal. And those calls kind of got turned up after George Floyd and what we saw in the summer of 2020. So they held a series of community meetings. It was led by the Orleans Parish Prison Reform Coalition to kind of explore this option. And the city council eventually created a task force to move forward with it. So one goal is to keep mentally ill people from getting arrested and from going into the jail that can really be detrimental to your mental health if you end up there. But it's also a way to free up police resources to kind of handle more serious, more violent issues. So those are sort of the two things. And, so far, like I said, city leaders have said that it's been really successful in both of those.
So if they need to be taken somewhere, where do they take them? Is like a mental health place at the...
Yeah, I actually don't have a good answer to that yet, where exactly people are being taken. My understanding would be, yes, some sort of mental health facility or a hospital where they...
LCMC or something.
Yeah.
I believe they've just stopped doing that at one of the facilities that was doing it before. They actually defunded it. I can't remember if it was LCMC or one of the others, but are you aware of that? That's one of the groups that lobbies on behalf of mental health issues.
I don't know the details, but I mean, there's been a huge decrease in sort of inpatient mental health beds in the city over the last several decades. So I think that will be an issue. Is are there the resources if we send out a response team that knows how to deal with it? Are there the rest of the resources that people need to kind of stabilize and get the care that they need?
And so the folks who are part of the teams, you say there are 2 teams and they're 24/7 teams. These are mental health professionals?
Yeah, so there's one licensed mental health professional and then a peer support specialist who's someone who has had experience with, I think, mental health issues on their own. And so they're I think, supposed to be there to sort of provide that perspective, that personal perspective on things.
So it's a matter of trying to increase safety for all involved, particularly the individual who perhaps is having a mental health crisis, and also to free up police officers.
Yeah, absolutely. And if the team gets to a situation and they realize that it may be more dangerous than they anticipated, they can call back to NOPD and ask for backup and
Okay, all right, Nick, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Tony, back on over to you. Yet another preservation issue has popped up, and it's immediately around an issue involving signage in the French Quarter, but it could apply citywide.
Yes, it's one that confused us, and as we were saying earlier, it's confusing by its nature. It's there's 35 signs around the city that the zoning laws protect, so that if a new business comes into a place like Two Jacks, which is the one that was at issue with this motion that was put by Councilman Freddie King, this is the second time at bat for him in the last month with preservationists. Right. He's trying to make it easier for businesses in the French Quarter who feel that they're overburdened with regulations and code enforcement and all that kind of stuff. Last month, as you may remember, he proposed suspending code enforcement for a year to give them a break. Right. But he, didn't face literal pitchforks, but he was in front of a meeting of hundreds of preservationists and backed off that one. But here he is again with a motion. It was actually the motion came in April, but it was before the City Planning Commission this past week, and preservationists were there in force again to say, don't change the rule on this sign because then it'll affect all these other signs around town like Casamento's, Blue Plate, in the quarter, Monteleone, Bricato's ice cream shop, and so on and so forth. The one at issue specifically was Two Jacks, right. And it's a weird one. It's the only one on the list where there are 2. There's the old one, which is at 823 Decatur Street, and then there's the one that they made a special allowance to recreate 4 blocks away when the owner moved because the rent at the old historic establishment was going to be too much when the lease came up.
So basically in Decatur we have 2 identical Two Jack signs?
Pretty much identical, within sight of each other, just 400 block and the 800 block.
So the owner now, and whomever has the business now in the building where the original Two Jacks, the restaurant was, and the sign still remains there, is the one who wants to be able to change the sign.
Yes, he did not allow the original Two Jacks owner to take the sign with him, and there's the speculation as to why that was the case. He had proposed at the time, soon after Two Jacks moved out, to change it to a Cajun Bistro sign, just basically keep the sign but put the new coloring and the new logo in, and now he wants to put in a Voodoo Donuts, which is a very popular donut shop.
I think it adds perspective to this conversation to point out that Mike Motwani
I should have said that. Yeah, it's Mike McWaney, who's got
very controversial.
He's a controversial guy. He's got a lot of T-shirt shops and I forget what the name is. It Chicken Shack, one of the chicken places that are the bane of the preservationists and traditionalists around town. So. That's and the other common denominator is Ike Spears, the pretty well-known lawyer who was the one making the case for the change.
All right. So for this new owner, though, this new owner could not make a sign like that and put up a new sign like that, correct?
Right.
Like the Tujac sign, which is this long, iconic sign for Tujac's restaurant.
Yeah, this sign, it's a big neon sign. A lot of people are familiar with it. That's been there for, it's actually, people don't know how long, but at least 1950. All these signs, these historic signs have to be at least 25 years old. There's no new big neon signs allowed in the French Quarter except on Bourbon Street. So one of the preservationists opposing it was speculating that Mike Matwani basically just wanted to find a loophole to grandfather in one of these big signs for a new tenant, and he has no comment.
Which by law right now he can't do. But also you told me that as far as these 35 signs that are out there, that they must remain. Is that
That's
what
right.
the law
They're
says?
protected by the zoning law. That's the purpose of it.
Very
Preservation.
interesting. We need to move on if we want to get to other stories right now. Make a quick point and then.
Well, I'm going to make my point right here. I've been to a Voodoo Donut shop. You'd think it started in New Orleans. It started in Portland, Oregon, is where it started. And their donuts, they had regular donuts, but what makes them different is they got like M&Ms on them. I mean, they all have all kind of decorations on them. Has nothing to do with Voodoo, but I guess if you live in Portland, I guess it really
Well, I'll
does.
take a beignet any day. Okay, you got to be real quick with your other story now.
Yeah, there's actually talk about building a new arena for basketball because NBA is saying that's kind of an old-fashioned. To me, it's still new, but now they have more modern floor plans that they use, and so it's long range. But it could be in the possibility of replacing it.
We'll see about that. Okay, Gabby.
Well, I got a break from crime and I wrote a couple listicles. One is about the most romantic places in New Orleans.
Oh.
So stay tuned for that.
Oh, yeah, I'd like to see what you recommend. Okay, Nick, over to you.
The city is trying to revamp a violence interruption program that has sort of like languished over this mayoral administration's tenure. So I'm interested to see what happens with that.
Tony, goes to you.
Back to the Smoothie King Center, the first world title fight with a New Orleans native since 1964 this Saturday with Regis the Rougarou Prograis defending his world super lightweight title.
The full name is definitely important, the Rougarou. Okay,
Rougarou.
all
They
right.
don't have Voodoo Donuts there.
Once again,
Portland.
I'll still go with the beignets. All right, guys, thank you so much. Great conversation. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.